The gates of Buckingham Palace trembled, not from protesters or paparazzi, but from a financial revelation so staggering it shocked the monarchy to its core. A sealed financial dossier, reportedly leaked from the heavily guarded archives of St. James's Palace, confirms the catastrophic number the Duke of Sussex has desperately tried to hide.
Palace accountants have uncovered a massive financial gap tied to Prince Harry, and it has sparked an urgent, full-scale audit inside royal financial offices. According to documents reportedly obtained by investigators, a staggering $19 million connected to funds meant for the Duke of Sussex cannot be clearly matched within official royal financial records. This is not some small bookkeeping slip or a misplaced receipt. Investigators say the issue points to a long pattern of financial confusion, stretching across several years, involving money that reportedly came from King Charles through the Duchy of Lancaster private estate. Sources familiar with the review say the situation raised serious questions the moment auditors started digging through the records. The investigation reportedly began during a routine annual audit in January 2025, when KPMG accountants working with the royal household reviewed Duchy of Lancaster payments made between the 2022 and 2024 fiscal years. During that review, forensic accountants noticed major gaps between the funds reportedly transferred to Prince Harry and the spending records that were supposed to explain where that money went. According to 3 senior palace financial officers who reportedly provided sworn statements to investigators, the missing money is linked to a series of wire transfers carried out through 17 separate transactions between March 2022 and November 2024. These are not claims floating around gossip circles or loose talk spreading online. Sources say the details appear inside a 47-page preliminary audit report prepared by a major international accounting firm and delivered to the Lord Chamberlain's office on January 23rd, 2025. So how did investigators confirm these findings? The first clue came from sections of the audit documentation itself. Reports say the files include detailed transaction logs showing transfer dates, exact amounts, and destination account identifiers tied to each payment. The paperwork also reportedly carries official KPMG letterhead, along with a case reference listed as LC-2025-0147, which investigators used to track the review. The second layer of confirmation comes from multiple insiders familiar with palace financial operations. In total, 5 separate sources have reportedly backed up the existence of the audit, including 2 accountants who were directly involved in reviewing the records. And the third piece of evidence comes from banking data. According to people familiar with the findings, the bank records include timestamps, routing details, and transfer metadata that line up precisely with the transactions described in the audit report. A fourth layer of verification comes from independent forensic accountants who have no connection to the royal household. After reviewing the transaction patterns, these experts reportedly confirmed that the gaps in the records are significant and cannot easily be explained by normal accounting delays or routine bookkeeping differences. In other words, the numbers raised serious red flags the moment specialists looked closely at them. Before going further, if you want to stay updated on developments surrounding this investigation, especially the details that large media outlets often overlook, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell right now. This story has been built from months of document reviews, expert opinions, and conversations with sources familiar with royal financial operations. The material being discussed comes from a lengthy investigation examining financial activity connected to senior members of the royal family. Reports focus on records suggesting unusual accounting gaps involving millions of dollars in transfers that investigators are still working to fully understand. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex and currently 5th in line to the British throne, has received financial assistance from his father, King Charles, since stepping back from official royal duties in January 2020. Much of that support reportedly came through the Duchy of Lancaster, a private estate that generates roughly $27 million each year for the monarch's personal use. These funds were reportedly meant to help cover security costs, charitable foundation work, and living expenses during Harry's transition toward financial independence. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex and Harry's wife since May 2018, has also been involved in overseeing the couple's financial matters through their Archewell Foundation and several business ventures. KPMG auditors, working under instructions from Lord Chamberlain Andrew Parker, reportedly found that the financial gaps could not be explained through any normal spending categories that would justify the transfers. According to sources familiar with the review, the documentation examined during the audit raised serious questions the moment investigators started comparing the numbers with official expense records. The foundation of this investigation centers on transaction data and financial records that show a pattern of unusual transfers. Between March 2022 and November 2024, reports indicate that King Charles approved 17 separate wire transfers from Duchy of Lancaster accounts to bank accounts linked to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Altogether, those transfers reportedly total $3,847,000. Under standard palace financial procedures, every transfer of that size is supposed to include clear documentation explaining the purpose of the payment, along with receipts, invoices, or other records showing how the money would be used. But the audit results revealed something surprising. Investigators say only $1,247,000 of those funds could be matched with proper documentation and verified expenses. That leaves approximately $2.6 million in transfers where the records reportedly do not clearly show how the money was spent or what specific costs the funds were intended to cover. The situation becomes even more puzzling when investigators looked closely at the individual transactions. One example appears in records dated March 17, 2022, when a wire transfer of $247,000 was reportedly sent with the note "Security Consultation Services." But auditors reviewing palace files say they could not locate any contract tied to security consulting for that payment. There were no invoices from a security company, no written agreements, and no assessment reports explaining what services were actually provided. According to sources familiar with the audit, the transfer simply moved into accounts connected to the Sussex household, yet the paperwork trail that normally explains how the funds were used appears incomplete. That missing documentation quickly raised questions among the financial reviewers. Another transfer reportedly took place on June 8, 2022, totaling $183,000 and labeled Archewell Foundation Operational Support. However, investigators reviewing public filings say the Archewell Foundation's 2022 financial reports, submitted to the California Attorney General's office, do not clearly show a matching income entry from the Duchy of Lancaster in that exact amount. That difference immediately caught the attention of auditors trying to trace the path of the funds. Then there is a third transaction dated September 22, 2022, showing a payment of $314,000 described as a legal fee advance for ongoing proceedings. Yet palace legal staff reportedly told auditors they were not involved in any case requiring that level of funding, and no law firm submitted billing records to the palace accounting office tied to that payment. Another transaction that raised eyebrows happened on December 15, 2022, when $198,000 was reportedly transferred with the description "property maintenance and repairs." But when auditors reviewed property records connected to the Montecito residence, they reportedly found no evidence of major renovations or repair projects during that time that would normally require such a large amount of funding. That missing explanation quickly added to the growing list of unanswered questions surrounding the transfers. The pattern continued throughout 2023, with 8 more transfers reportedly ranging from $94,000 to $276,000. Each payment carried brief or vague descriptions, yet investigators say they struggled to connect those transfers to any verified expenses, contracts, or legitimate operational costs. The lack of detailed paperwork made the situation even more concerning for the accountants reviewing the records. One of the most striking transactions appeared in the audit dated April 4, 2024, when $422,000 was reportedly sent with the note "Emergency Medical Expenses." However, according to people familiar with the review, auditors were unable to locate supporting records such as hospital invoices, insurance filings, or communication with medical providers tied to that payment. When auditors asked about the transfer, sources say palace officials reported no known family medical emergency during that period that would explain such a large expense.
The Times woke up today and said, "If you think those ratings from the We Can End Homelessness documentary by Prince William were bad, check out these numbers." I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this is explosive extensive reporting, 5 months of reporting from the Times that culminated in this Duchy Files investigation piece, revealed the property empires that make Charles and William million.
Because of that, investigators flagged the transaction for further review as they continued examining whether financial procedures and documentation rules were properly followed. Royal household financial rules are normally strict when it comes to large transfers. Any payment exceeding $50,000 is supposed to pass through a clear approval process before the money ever moves. The policy requires authorization from the Lord Chamberlain, along with a detailed explanation of why the funds are needed and supporting paperwork submitted at least 7 business days in advance. Every transfer must also be logged in the official disbursement register with full details, and within 90 days, receipts and a final accounting report are expected to show exactly how the money was spent. But according to the audit findings, investigators say none of the 17 transfers tied to this review fully followed those required procedures. Reports claim that advanced documentation was missing, formal approval records were incomplete, and receipts confirming how the funds were used were never submitted through the usual channels. The situation becomes even more interesting when auditors examined who processed the transactions. Records indicate that all 17 transfers were handled through a single palace financial officer who has since retired from royal service. The individual's name has not been publicly released because the matter is still under review. According to colleagues familiar with the system, that officer had the authority to execute transfers after approvals were granted, but not the authority to skip documentation steps or approve payments independently. Testimony from other palace finance staff suggests the transfers were pushed through using an emergency fast-track procedure, a process normally reserved for urgent situations like immediate security costs or sudden medical needs requiring rapid access to funds. The emergency transfer procedure inside the royal financial system is designed for rare and urgent situations. It allows large payments to be processed within 24 hours, but there is still a rule that all supporting documents must be submitted within 30 days after the transfer. However, according to the audit review, investigators say that in all 17 cases, the emergency label may have been applied even though the normal conditions for that process were not clearly documented. Even more concerning, the follow-up paperwork that should have been delivered afterward reportedly never arrived, despite repeated requests from palace accounting supervisors. Email records reviewed during the audit show a long chain of communication stretching from April 2022 to September 2024. During that period, palace financial supervisors reportedly sent 43 separate requests to representatives connected to Prince Harry, asking for the missing documentation tied to those transfers. With each message, the tone reportedly became more serious, especially in the final requests sent during August and September 2024, warning that the matter could be escalated to senior household officials and possibly outside auditors if the records were not provided. One email dated September 19, 2024, reportedly from an Archewell representative, stated that the requested documentation has been compiled and will be submitted shortly. Yet according to investigators reviewing the case, the documents were never delivered. Forensic accountants also compared this situation with financial records connected to other senior members of the royal family. When examining support payments involving figures such as Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward, auditors reportedly found documentation compliance rates exceeding 97%, making the Sussex-related records stand out as unusually incomplete during the review. In the other cases examined by auditors, transfers involving senior royal family members were reportedly handled by the book. Payments were approved properly, clear explanations were submitted ahead of time, and receipts or final accounting records were delivered soon after the funds were used. When an occasional receipt was missing or delayed, it was typically corrected quickly once accountants asked for clarification. But according to the audit comparison, investigators say they could not find another situation within the royal financial system that resembled 17 separate transfers totaling nearly $3.8 million where such a large portion of the funds lacked full supporting documentation. That contrast immediately caught the attention of the forensic reviewers studying the records. This comparison suggests that the situation may not simply be the result of general confusion or widespread problems inside royal accounting systems. The procedures are well established, widely understood by household staff, and, according to the auditors, are followed in the vast majority of cases involving other royal family members. Because of that, investigators began looking more closely at the transaction patterns themselves. Forensic accountants who specialize in financial investigations reviewed the payment sequences and reportedly noticed several warning signs within the structure of the transfers. One example involves the amounts of the payments themselves. Analysts observed that some transfers were structured in figures that appeared close to certain internal review thresholds, levels where larger payments might normally trigger additional financial scrutiny. This pattern drew further attention as experts continued analyzing the flow of funds. Royal household financial policy includes another safeguard designed to catch unusually large payments. Any single transfer exceeding $500,000 is supposed to trigger an additional legal review by the Treasury solicitor before the funds are released. Interestingly, none of the 17 transfers identified in the audit crossed that line, although several reportedly came very close, landing in the $400,000 to $450,000 range. Forensic reviewers noted that pattern because amounts structured just below oversight limits can sometimes attract attention during financial investigations. Auditors also examined the timing of several transfers, and they reportedly noticed clusters of payments appearing around moments when the Sussex household was believed to be dealing with significant financial obligations. For example, 3 transfers totaling $647,000 reportedly occurred within weeks of the September 2023 refinancing of the Montecito mortgage, a process that typically involves closing costs and other large fees. Another pair of transfers totaling $421,000 reportedly appeared close to January 2024, around the time public reports surfaced about the end of the couple's Spotify partnership, which had been expected to generate substantial revenue. Forensic accountants also pointed out a technical pattern sometimes described in financial investigations as layering. Bank records reviewed during the audit suggest that some funds were first received in a Sussex-linked business account and then moved to other accounts within 24 to 72 hours. Rapid transfers like this can make tracking the final destination of funds more complicated, which is why investigators flagged those movements for deeper review as part of the ongoing financial analysis. The situation also places Prince William in an extremely difficult position. If he chooses to stay silent, some observers might interpret that as indifference toward potential financial problems within the family. But if he speaks publicly, it could deepen the already visible rift between the royal households and spark even more headlines about internal conflict. From a public relations standpoint, analysts say there are no easy moves here, only different forms of damage control. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the personal stakes could be just as serious. Much of their post-royal career has relied on public interest in their story and their continued connection to the royal family. If financial controversy becomes a major headline, reputation experts warn it could affect how the public and potential business partners view their brand. Large media companies and corporate partners often move carefully when reputational questions appear. Analysts say organizations such as streaming platforms, production partners, and other collaborators typically review potential risks before continuing major deals. Because of that uncertainty, several possible outcomes have been discussed by commentators and royal watchers. One scenario involves full acknowledgement and financial settlement. In that situation, Prince Harry and Meghan could explain that documentation procedures were not handled properly, express regret over administrative issues, and potentially offer repayment of some or all questioned funds in order to resolve the dispute and avoid a long public battle. Supporters of the first scenario say that admitting documentation mistakes and offering repayment could calm the situation and possibly reopen the door for some level of family reconciliation. Taking that route could also reduce legal pressure and shift the story toward resolution instead of conflict. However, critics point out that such an admission would require publicly acknowledging errors, something commentators say the Sussex camp has rarely done during previous disputes. Some analysts believe legal advisors might encourage this option if they determine that refusing cooperation could create larger legal or reputational risks. Even so, observers say the likelihood of this path remains uncertain because it would require a significant shift in strategy from how past controversies have been handled. Estimated probability discussed by commentators, around 20%. The second possible outcome involves a far more aggressive defense strategy. In this scenario, the Sussex team could argue that financial transfers between a father and son fall under private family matters, not something that should be examined through public scrutiny or internal audits. They could frame the investigation as pressure from royal institutions reacting to their independence and public statements. This approach would allow them to maintain a narrative of being unfairly targeted while avoiding any direct admission of wrongdoing. However, analysts warn that such a move could lead to a complete financial separation from royal support and potentially trigger attempts to recover disputed funds through legal channels. Because this strategy aligns with the couple's past communication style, some observers believe it may be the most likely route. Estimated probability mentioned by commentators, about 45%. A third scenario involves partial cooperation. Under that possibility, the Sussex team might provide documentation for certain transfers while explaining that other records were misplaced, destroyed, or protected under legal confidentiality rules such as attorney-client privilege. Another possibility analysts have discussed involves partial acknowledgement mixed with explanation. In this situation, the Sussex team might admit that their financial management could have been handled more carefully, but argue that the problems came from intense pressure during their transition away from royal duties. They could point to limited staff support, complicated logistics, and the tense relationship with royal institutions as factors that made proper documentation more difficult at the time. This strategy would allow them to show some cooperation with investigators while still avoiding full responsibility. It could also help maintain their broader narrative about the challenges they faced after leaving royal life. Auditors might receive some of the paperwork they requested, but key gaps in the records could remain unresolved, leaving major questions still hanging over the transfers. Analysts estimate the likelihood of this scenario at around 25%. The final and most extreme scenario involves complete refusal to cooperate. In that situation, the Sussex team would decline to provide documents, decline interviews, and essentially challenge the royal household to pursue formal legal action if they want answers. Supporters of this strategy might believe the royal family would avoid a courtroom battle because of the enormous publicity and family drama it would create. But experts warn this approach carries serious risks. Legal proceedings could open the door to court discovery, sworn testimony, and detailed financial records becoming public, which could dramatically expand the story. For now, the outcome remains uncertain, and many questions are still waiting for answers. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with others, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps keep these deep investigations coming, and the conversation is just getting started.